Good day, dear sir and madam. Today we will talk about Plato's and Aristotle's view on mimesis and the other ideas of these scholars. Mimesis is a critical and philosophical term that carries a lot of meanings which include imitation, representation, mimicry, receptivity, the act of resembling, the act of expression, and the presentation of the self. In ancient Greece, mimesis was an idea that governed the creation of works of art, in particular with correspondence to the physical world understood as a model for beauty, truth, and the good. Plato contrasted mimesis, or imitation, with diegesis, or narrative. Both Plato and Aristotle saw in mimesis the representation of nature. Plato wrote about mimesis in both Ion and the Republic. In Ion, he states that poetry is the art of divine madness or inspiration, because the poet is subject to this divine madness. Instead of possessing art or knowledge of the subject, the poet does not speak truth. As Plato has it, the only truth is the concern of the philosopher. In Book 2, in the Republic, Plato describes Socrates' dialogue with his pupils. Socrates warns we should not seriously regard poetry as being capable of attaining the truth, and that we who listen to poetry should be on our guard against its seductions, since the poet has no place in our idea of God. In developing this, in Book 10, Plato told of Socrates' metaphor of these three beds. One bed exists as an idea made by God, the Platonic ideal, one is made by the carpenter in imitation of God's idea, and one is made by the artist in imitation of the carpenter's. So the artist's bed is twice removed from the truth. The copiers only touch on a small part of things as they really are, where a bed may appear differently from various points of view, looked at obliquely or directly or differently again in a mirror. So painters or poets, though they may paint or describe a carpenter or any other maker of things, know nothing of the carpenter's, and though the better painters or poets they are, the more faithfully their works of art will resemble the reality of the carpenter making a bed. The poets, beginning with Homer, far from improving and educating humanity, do not possess the knowledge of a craftsman and are mere imitators who copy again and again images of virtue and rhapsodize about them, but never reach the truth in the way the superior philosophers do. What is Aristotle's view on mimesis? Similar to Plato's writings about mimesis, Aristotle also defined mimesis as the perfection and imitation of nature. Art is not only imitation but also the use of mathematical ideas and symmetry in the search for the perfect, the timeless. Nature is full of change, decay, and cycles, but art can also search for what is everlasting and the first causes of natural phenomena. Aristotle wrote about the idea of four causes in nature. Aristotle's Poetics is often referred to as the counterpart to this Platonic conception of poetry. Poetics is the treatise on the subject of mimesis. Aristotle was not against literature as such. He stated that human beings are mimetic beings, feeling an urge to create texts that reflect and represent reality. Aristotle considered it important that there be a certain distance between the work of art on the one hand and life on the other. We draw knowledge and consolation from tragedies only because they do not happen to us. Without this distance, tragedy could not give rise to catharsis. However, it is equally important that the text causes the audience to identify with the characters and events in the text, and unless this identification occurs, it does not touch us and an audience. Aristotle holds that it's through simulated representation, mimesis, that we respond to the acting on the stage which is conveying to us what the characters feel, so that we may empathize with them in this way through the mimetic form of dramatic role-play. It is the task of the dramatist to produce the tragic enactment in order to accomplish this empathy by means of what is taking place on stage. In short, catharsis can only be achieved if we see something that is both recognizable and distinct. Aristotle argued that literature is more interesting as a means of learning than history, because history deals with specific facts that have happened and which are contingent, whereas literature, although sometimes based on history, deals with events that could have taken place or ought to have taken place. Aristotle thought of drama as being an imitation of an action, and of tragedy as falling from a higher to a lower state, and so being removed to a less ideal situation in more tragic circumstances than before. He posited the characters in tragedy as being better than the average human being, and those of comedy as being worse. What can we say about diegesis? It was also Plato and Aristotle who contrasted mimesis with diegesis. Mimesis shows rather than tells by means directly represented action that is enacted. Diegesis, however, is the telling of the story by a narrator. The author narrates action indirectly and describes what is in the characters' minds and emotions. The narrator may speak as a particular character, or maybe the invisible narrator, or even the all-knowing narrator who speaks from above in the form of commenting on the actions or the characters. That's all for now. Subscribe. See you in the next video.